Okay, my friends, it is Monday, March 10th, 2025, and these are three big stories. Yes, three big stories. I've driven it down. I cut out all the extraneous things. We're going to focus on this. And now it looks like we just keep doing the same thing of turning screws on our friends and giving incentives and benefits to enemies. So we'll start with this. The U.S. is just about ready to lift Ukraine intel freeze, Trump says ahead of the Saudi meeting. But why were they lifting? Why were they even talking about this? Why were they freezing intel? Well, that was to get the Ukrainians to the table. And here's what Trump had to say. Well, we just about have, when he's asked if he's going to lift intel, the freeze on intel, Trump told reporters on Air Force One when asked if he would consider resuming intelligence sharing, "We want to do anything we can to get Ukraine serious about getting something done." Now, Russia's not serious about getting something done, but we're only looking at this one side of the equation. Trump's administration has embarked on a dramatic pivot away from the ironclad backing of Ukraine backed by former President Joe Biden's administration. Okay, yeah, for as long as it takes and that sort of thing. Okay, Trump has falsely blamed Ukraine for starting the war. He tried to undermine President Volodymyr Zelensky's legitimacy, sought to strong-arm Kyiv into a controversial minerals sharing deal, and froze military aid and intelligence support in a bid to force Ukraine into making concessions to Russia. It's really, they're attacking the victim here and forcing the victim to make all these concessions or have to, we're going to punish the victim. Tuesday's talks in Jeddah are intended to revitalize bilateral relations. So let's look at that. At the talks in Saudi Arabia, the U.S. will push for Ukraine to commit to a ceasefire, according to Bloomberg. Trump wants to persuade Zelensky to agree to a partial truce. So he wants that, and Zelensky's coming prepared to talk about that as well. So Zelensky's just arriving in Saudi Arabia, and here's The Guardian. Zelensky flies to Saudi Arabia to meet Crown Prince as Russia steps up attacks. So Zelensky is in Saudi Arabia, and Donald Trump has sought to force Zelensky to agree to a deal to end the war with Russia. And last week, the U.S. president piled on the pressure by cutting off crucial military assistance and intelligence sharing. Both of those things. No, you can't actually get these things that were already requisitioned for you, and we're going to kind of blind you to offensive intelligence, at least. On Tuesday, a Ukrainian delegation led by Andriy Yermak, Zelensky's chief of staff, will meet with U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and other senior White House officials, the first official meeting since the disastrous Oval Office argument between Zelensky and Trump and Vance. And Vance was the one kind of precipitating it, in my estimation. The White House has framed Trump's Ukraine policy as intended to achieve a lasting peace, but the president is focused primarily on pressuring Zelensky to hand over mineral wealth to the U.S. It seems kind of one-sided and a little awkward. Zelensky will not attend Tuesday's talks, but the Ukrainian delegation will include his foreign and defense ministers, and that might be a good thing for right now. Trump aide Steve Witkoff said that Washington expected substantial progress from the talks. Asked on Fox News if he thought that Zelensky could sign the minerals deal this week, Witkoff said, "I'm really hopeful. All the signs are very, very positive." Okay, so we'll see how that all plays out. The Ukrainian side is expected to propose a peace plan that features a halt to the drone and missile strikes, as well as a suspension of military activity in the Black Sea. Now, I think that's actually a brilliant move. Suspending, now you're already kind of blinded from cut off intelligence, and so suspending that where you can't really hit Russian oil facilities as well, and they can still continue to hit your power infrastructure, electricity grid, that sort of thing. I think that's a good idea. And I don't think that Putin's going to be able to not do that. I don't know how Putin keeps himself from doing that. Okay, it's Russia. That's not Ukraine. That's the obstacle, says an analyst at the ISW, the Institute for the Study of War, who focuses on Russia and Ukraine. He wrote that on X. He added, Ukraine has offered many concessions to the start of the peace process. Russia has offered zero. I think that's correct as well. Russia's not offered any. Okay, In other news, Denmark is ready to send peacekeeping troops to Ukraine, as is Australia. But Putin doesn't want Europeans in Ukraine, and he's made that clear. And now he's also saying that Russia warns Australia deploying peacekeeping troops to Ukraine would lead to grave consequences. I'm not sure who he wants in Ukraine. He clearly doesn't want anybody who has sided with Ukraine. So who does he want? Maybe Chinese, maybe North Koreans. I don't know. He doesn't want to see Europeans there. So I think he's going to drag his feet about peacekeeping. Okay, British Prime Minister Starmer will hold an online meeting of world leaders to discuss Ukraine on Saturday, according to Reuters. I think this is a brilliant move. He's announcing this ahead of time where they're about to have these talks. If things go off the rails again, they have this. It was really good that they already had a pre-existing meeting in London on Sunday after that disastrous meeting in the Oval Office on a Friday. Okay, foreign affairs. Next, let's go to the next big story, and that is, like, what's the fallout of all this going to be? And no pun intended with fallout. Get ready for the next nuclear age. There's going to be a nuclear arms race. This is in Foreign Affairs magazine, which is a very Tony, very academic magazine. Okay, so it's talking about France here. I just highlighted 2 paragraphs, and this is really important. Why did France get the bomb when it was already covered by America's nuclear umbrella? Because French President Charles de Gaulle simply didn't trust Washington to live up to its security guarantees. Extended deterrence was a sham, he felt, and for Paris to be truly secure, it had no choice but to acquire nuclear capability of its own, and it was costly. As he put in 1963, America's nuclear weapons remain the essential guarantee of world peace, but it remains that American nuclear power does not necessarily respond immediately to all the eventualities concerning Europe and France. Thus, we have decided to equip ourselves with an atomic force that is unique to us. The French called this the force de frappe, the strike force. For generations, most non-French analysts have scoffed at this reasoning, seeing it as reflecting excessive Gallic pride or paranoia rather than sober strategic logic. After the first few weeks of the second Trump administration, it seems prescient, and fewer scoffing now. Yes, but it's not just the French. Now everybody who, like the Poles, are thinking about getting a nuclear weapon, and there's going to be an arms race in that. Okay, now what else is going to be the fallout of this kind of thing? If you do get a peace deal and you do get a temporary secession of some sort, okay, this is the intelligence minister, and he's going to be saying this. You say that Russia needs a pause. And he goes on and says, to recuperate, what signs do you see that they need to recuperate? Well, listen, this is an interesting question. What do you mean signs? Well, if you ask the head of intelligence, there are signs for this. Absolutely all of them, starting from the fact that they have reached the maximum of their production. It's impossible to produce more than what's already been produced. Now, that's really important because if they are legitimately at the end of their capacity, then a pause is needed to build up. So that could be kind of a bad thing for Ukraine if that's the case. Pause is needed. A day of war for Russia costs a little less than $1 billion. How about that? A little less than $1 billion each day. Do you realize what kind of money that this is? He goes on. 41% of the official budget. Russia spends its own money, and this is important. We have partners in this regard, and they spend their own money. And so that's really interesting as perspective goes. Like, Ukraine can continue to spend even though Russia is spending down. So, okay, that's where we are there. Now, Trump's team considers easing sanctions on Russian oil. This is the last big story, the third and last of these. Trump's team considers easing restrictions on this oil. What's going on? Well, weren't we, kind of turning the screws on Ukraine? Yes, but advisors to U.S. President Donald Trump are reportedly discussing options for easing sanctions on Russia. Wait, shouldn't they be turning the screws on them as well, adding more sanctions until they come to the table, including those targeting Russian oil? This move could be considered by the administration as an incentive for the Kremlin to negotiate an end to the Russo-Ukrainian war. Among these options reportedly under consideration is easing the price cap on Russian oil. Last week, Reuters also reported that the U.S. is working on a plan to potentially ease sanctions against Russia as part of Donald Trump's efforts to renew ties with Moscow and end the war in Ukraine. Look, Every presidential administration tries to do this reset with Russia, and it never works. Here's how RT is carrying this. The Trump team could lift Russian sanctions, according to Bloomberg. The White House is reportedly considering ending the price cap on Russian oil as part of a peace deal. Bloomberg has claimed that, citing anonymous sources, that Trump advisors are also looking at what sanctions the U.S. could lift or tweak in order to encourage Moscow to agree to a ceasefire. Russian officials have repeatedly, now this is what's really interesting about this, Russian officials have repeatedly dismissed the impact of Western sanctions, with President Vladimir Putin stating that they have not significantly harmed the Russian economy and have only made it more resilient. So more sanctions, Putin says, has made the Russian economy more resilient. So I guess if you decrease that, it makes the Russian economy less resilient, and maybe that's how they turn the screws. I'm just kidding about that part, but I mean, like, it's bizarre. Putin has also stressed that while Moscow is ready to engage, it will insist on securing its strategic objectives and resolving the root causes of the Ukraine conflict. Quote, "We don't want anything that belongs to others, but we also won't give up what's ours," the Russian president said. Well, what's yours that is actually Ukraine's? Okay, that's where we are. Okay, meanwhile, Trump considers halting U.S. weapons supplies to Ukraine until Zelensky leaves office. Theoretically. Now, so this was carried here in Interfax, but it really is the only source that I could track this down to was Build. I see it in numerous places, but Build was saying that, so take that one with a grain of salt. But there's a U.S. senator that's threatening to sanction the blank out of Russia. Lindsey Graham is saying that he'll propose new restrictions, but this is ultimately meaningless because if Trump doesn't want to do it, nothing happens. See, so sanctions can be proposed by Congress, but then the president has to sign on, so that's kind of pointless. So that's where we are with that. All right, a couple last things. I'm anxious, overwhelmed, and have a terrible headache. Have you tried consuming nothing but coffee and horrifying news updates? Well, that's what it kind of feels like. Okay, last little thing. This was kind of funny. I was in Greg Terry's live last night. I wasn't on, but I was just in the comments while he was talking about critical update, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Let's talk about it. And so I was saying, just, kind of being funny, I was saying, so hit the like button, guys. If you hit enough, you hit the like button, he'll sing the Ukrainian national anthem. And yeah, so somebody put this in one of my comments today, retaliation for yesterday's, retaliation is such a hard word, retaliation for yesterday's comment from Professor Gerdes on Greg Terry's Experience stream. If you hit the like button, Professor Gerdes will pronounce the names of 10 unpronounceable Russian towns. Well played. I'm a bilingual illiterate. I can't speak in multiple languages, and that's okay. All right, my friends, that's all that I have. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.